are exceptions. Exceptions is used when documents are scanned in by mistake, such as a letter, a piece of correspondence, or a purchase order, or something that isn't an invoice. That would be captured by the exceptions queue for you to manually correct. So we can see that of those 5 invoices that have been scanned in, 3 of those have been correctly recognised and are therefore valid. We have 2, one in an exception state and one in a rejected state. What this means is that these 2 invoices don't comply fully to the set of business rules that we have in place for these invoices. So if I click on this first one, which is an exception, we can see here down in the bottom right hand corner that there's an amber or yellow flag set for the invoice date, and that's because the invoice date doesn't fall within the predetermined range. So as an operator, I now have the option of choosing a reason that this is an exception or forcing it to be valid. Now, that may or may not meet your internal business rules, and this can be adjusted as such. With the rejected invoice, it's exactly the same idea, except you can see here we have a red flag. A red flag is a hard stop, meaning that the operator doesn't need to choose the reason or what's going to happen to this particular invoice. The system has said, no, this is not a valid invoice, it does not meet business rules. And the reason for that, if we look here, is because the expected value for the tax line isn't as it should be. So for example, we have a net tax and a total amount here, and a tax percentage of 19%. So the system has worked out what 19% is of the net amount, and it knows that that tax line doesn't match, and therefore there is a problem. With these 3 that are valid, all of those checks have been passed, and therefore we know that the information that's being passed to our line of business application is correct. You can see here that we've identified the business unit, so this is the addressee of the invoice. The vendor or the supplier of the invoice has been identified, invoice number, invoice date, and total amounts. If we needed to, we can use our find button to look up our vendor from our vendor database. We can also search for vendors using Type Ahead or a smart search facility. The same is true of the business unit as well. Where information is incorrectly identified, should that happen, you have the ability to correct that using your mouse. You can see as I move the mouse over the fields, they're highlighted. So for example, if this tax rate was incorrect, I could simply choose the correct value. Notice when I do that, this training button up here lights up. What training allows you to do is to correct invoices that have been incorrectly recognised, so that future invoices, the information is extracted correctly. Once I press this train button, a copy of this invoice is sent to a training queue. The training queue allows you to manage all of the invoices that have been sent for training by operators in a vendor-specific way. So, for example, it will form a task for each of your suppliers. We can have a look at that in a moment. Once training is complete, and the period of training will depend upon the number of fields captured on the invoice and the quality of the invoice as well. But once training is complete, we can then export these documents, and at export the information extracted will be posted into your line of business application, which could be SAP, for example, Sage, any number of invoice solutions. So once I'm happy that I've validated or